It's your boy Mike Muse on the Conversation, the Mike Muse Show. I am so extremely excited to be in conversation with my next guest. I have looked at her career from afar. This is going to be my first time meeting her, and I have always been wildly impressed for the work that she does on behalf of culture and community globally. When I think about the term activism and redefining activism, I really do think of my next guest. You guys all know my relationship with activism, and I always felt like insecure that I wasn't an activist, and I was always shy to call myself an activist because I wasn't out there marching, I wasn't out there with the clipboards, and I wasn't out there with the bullhorn, and so I didn't think I could call myself an activist until somebody said, Mike, the work that you do through economics and finance and doing your space, that is activism unto itself. And then from there, I started just redefining what activism is. And I always said, if you're a chef, you can be an activist too. Just make a meal for a group or a community. And then I also too said, if you're like a fashion designer into the fashion world, like, you know, do a shirt or something of that nature that had a statement of purpose. And I always thought about this next guest because of that. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, the incredible, the dynamic, the trailblazing, the iconic, and the historic Bethann Hardison. How are you?
Thank you. My goodness, you're really busy.
Yeah,
well, you did that very well. Oh man, I hope I can skip to your tune. Yes.
No, you
That's
absolutely
great.
can. I mean, you've been skipping to a tune that we've all been following for decades, and I love the space that you brought and how you made individuals think sometimes pop culture isn't substantive, right? And the way you have took fashion and made it substantive is to be commended. How did you begin to really think about, you know, allowing fashion to be able to have a voice in culture, in change, and in activism?
I grew up in an industry that was a little bit more, I guess, forgiving in a way, the garment industry. I didn't have issues about getting a job. Once I started to model, it was because of Willie Smith and the support of the Jewish women I worked for. They always believed I could do everything. I always had a full-time job. So I could start to model and do things for people, but I had no interest to be a model. Eventually you wind up going into this world and you keep going along and your life just unfolds because other people support you to do things. Having a model agency, for instance, and having that opportunity to have that gave me a better chance to see what was going on in the world of modeling, because you could see what the white models were getting paid and what the black ones were getting paid. My model agency was a white model agency with a black owner. I was the owner. But I incorporated naturally black kids, Asian kids, and Latin kids, because that's the world I want to always see. I want it integrated. And being able to speak to those who actually made those decisions and say, well, you have 35 white girls, I know, and you want one great black girl for me to get you a black. So you could hear the way they speak about things, and it's based more on ignorance, and they're just following the leader. And so oftentimes, all of a sudden, the black model disappeared when she was there before. And you just have to, if you have history and you're in something long enough, you can actually help people to understand the ways of the means or the way they do things, and just sort of like help them to see, did you know that we already did this before? And, you know, do you realize that if you don't have any models of color that's racism? Or do you understand? You could speak to it, and they oftentimes would listen. At one given point, it got really bad because the industry had changed. It changed with casting directors being hired by designers and stylists being hired by designers. That changed the game. Eastern Europe opened up. They didn't have that before. The wall came down. All of a sudden, scouts could go in and look for models and bring them across and bring them into America. That hadn't happened before. Our industry changed so much that it gave those designers and those people an opportunity to play in a whole new land, which means they didn't even want to have anything that was significant of before. So they didn't even want to have the supermodel. They didn't even want to have a Linda Evangelista. It wasn't just a reason of just going against blacks. That was not what they wanted. They wanted to have that Eastern European girl who basically all look alike, all sort of like have them walk down the runway the same. And you didn't notice the girl, you just noticed the clothes.
So, audience, we are here to unpack with that beautiful intro that Bethann gave, her new documentary that is out everywhere, Invisible Beauty. And audience, when I tell you, I began to look at not so much fashion difference. I always knew fashion was substantive, so not like I looked at it differently. But Ben, for the first time, there was something about the thematic theme of this documentary. I kept going back to like the economics of racism and like the economics of identity, because in every instance, and the people who were telling stories and telling your stories, it was always, we're not looking for black models right now. We're not booking black models, or black models don't sell magazines, or black models don't sell clothes, or black models are not anything that America would want to aspire to. And we all know about racism, but really for the first time back then, watching this documentary, I really started thinking about this dynamic of economics of racism and economics of identity. It is singularly pointed to the fashion industry.
Yeah, I think, it's the truth of it. You start to change the game. I think people really, I love that you're very concerned with economics because it's so important.
Yeah.
So often people skip over that. But in the end of the day, it does help change how people see others. I'm more interested in incorporating all races. I believe in diversity everywhere. If I start seeing too many blacks, I want to see, where's the white girl in the red hair? I want to see the Asian girl. Where's the Asian girls? That's who I am.
Yeah.
People think because I had the Black Girls Coalition, for instance, or that I was in Versailles and I was one of those top models in Versailles, that I have to be all about black. Well, I'm all about black when you begin to oppress us.
Yes.
And then I get very, very conscious.
Yeah, but you also too have a way of understanding. If I can lean into like a piece, audience, Bethann is responsible for the amazing supermodel Tyson Beckford, and discovering Tyson and really making Tyson what he is today. But there was something about, I had never heard the story about how Tyson Beckford got into polo, and how he became the face of Ralph Lauren. And you, understanding culture and movement, understood. Well, I'm gonna ask you, what made you think to put Tyson Beckford into and pitch him to Ralph Lauren to be the face?
Well, because I have a white model agency, and Ralph Lauren's always been someone I love Ralph. I love Ralph Lauren. And Tyson wasn't the first black that Ralph ever used. Many people think that because he blew up in such a way that everyone just forget about anything they ever knew. But it was just more the fact that we pitched our kids to everyone. And in this particular day, I had sent him and another young man up to see Bruce Weber, and Bruce had sent him over to the advertising agency. The advertising agency then told Ralph, we got this guy we think you might like. And that was the beginning of it. The way the story's told, like with Kim Heisfeld in the film, she gives me all the credit in a very special way. I just told him because of what was happening. I didn't have to. I once again give Ralph the credit because once he just saw him, he knew.
But in the film, it talks about recognizing the role that polo was playing in hip hop, and the way a lot of individuals in hip hop were using Ralph Lauren almost as like this antithesis of what America is, right? Like white elitism and luxury and privilege, right? And kind of redefining it and remixing it and making it our own.
That's it.
And so I love that you guys were able to identify, well, if blacks are purchasing Ralph Lauren with such economic buying power, we need to have a face that's reflective of the consumers that's buying it.
Well, the interesting thing...
I thought that was brilliant.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's very important for you to understand, too, and everyone to know, that once again, you got to give credit to I say often, people coin everything I quote, my quotes, but that's when I give credit to the bear. Because to me, he saw that. Once he put him in that red polo hoodie, he saw, I think their company saw how it sold out like that there was no resistance. Now, who's buying it? Probably us, but that tells you there's a market out there.
Yeah.
And I think the wisdom on his part was that I showed Ralph that Tyson became the entity that people came to see, and not necessarily Polo or Ralph Lauren. And that's what Ralph recognized, and he bought right into it. I love that. I give great respect when someone could see that and not resist it, because I'm asking, now you're going to have to pay us a lot now because we're going to go down this road, but it's because of what you've done. Tyson really is the one that they're coming to see in the stores. They're coming to see Tyson. And that was brilliant on Ralph's part.
It was such an association. Like for me, as it was like a case study of like as I was reflecting and looking at the documentary, like the time I thought about polo, I thought about Tyson, right? When I thought about purchasing a polo shirt, Tyson Beckford came into my head, into my mind. And for me, that showed the power of like representation, right? And we always talk about how that matters. If you only see like white women on magazines at airport newsstands, you think that is beauty, and then therefore I'm other, right? And so
Well,
we
a lot
always,
of people, I'm going to tell you something. I know you know that's true because that's what women say.
Yeah.
So many people say that. I never felt like that.
Yeah.
Growing up as a kid, I had my neighborhood. Nobody was better than my people.
Yeah.
I mean, I never, and then my first crush on a model was not like these kids are like, it's Naomi Campbell or something. Was a blonde girl with blue eyes named Carol Lindley. And I never thought that she made me feel better about myself. But that's the difference of human beings. And I think it's when you grow up, too, is when and where. When and where.
And you came up in a time where, like, I just think about how black people got up and we dressed very formally.
But cool.
Right? And had a style.
So much.
Talk to us about that.
No, it's really important. I say that. I said, like, there was just guys on the street corner. You could just walk by a guy and you'd notice his double pleated pant or his cordovan shoe or his wingtip or the style of. I just sort of thought that people just had so much style where I came from, and even the women who didn't, even the men that didn't, they still were funny. They had character. There was so much to sort of like be proud or just naturally just assume that that's how cool we are. My mother hung out with drag queens that was the 50s. My mother would come in the house and I would see her walk in I would be looking at TV and I would see her walking with two guys and 3 women would walk out. I never understood it. I never knew. But that was because they were putting on her clothes and they were going to this drag club they used to go to.
Yeah.
I mean, what a cool experience.
It was amazing. But also, too, think about like positioning in place. So not only time, but then also location, being in New York City.
That's right.
Like, me coming from the Midwest. Like I was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan. And so there wasn't like this diversity of look and feel. Right? Everything was very one-dimensional, which is why I enjoy, and I'm kind of leaning in for Tyson just really quickly, just for a second here, because we're so often, we always think about, beauty, identity from like the female lens and gaze.
Yes.
It's rare that we look at it from the male perspective.
Exactly.
And Tyson said something really powerful in this documentary where he said, when I put on a suit, it was reflective that a black man could be an executive, a lawyer, a doctor, even the president. And it made me think like, my God, that is true. Because if you look at the power of Jay-Z, right? Jay-Z had a major impact on how black men dressed, right? From like extra large baggy white t-shirts, and then he flipped it up and everybody started wearing button downs because he was wearing button downs, right? And so sometimes for black men, we just need that permission from one to look and dress, to make us look and dress and feel differently.
Yeah, to give you an example.
Yeah.
An example is so important so often, and especially when you know that example is already succeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're failing, maybe you won't do that. But
there was a time we didn't have that much representation of seeing black men in different range.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. Business. And the fact you look at someone like Jay-Z, who really is truly, he grew up not far from where I grew up. So it's very interesting to see that kind of person succeed continually and be also cool.
Yeah. Something I thought was really powerful. Audience, you're not going to, whatever you think this documentary is not what you think it is. For me, when I was approaching it, I thought it was going to be like a fashion story, right? But in the end, I walked out thinking about redefining activism, the economics of identity and racism, and then geopolitics, which I did not expect at all, audience. And my audience is very warm to geopolitics, and we have incredible conversations around it. But audience, there's a moment that I didn't even know when you guys mentioned the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Oh, I used that as example.
Yeah. Can you talk to me about the significance of the fall of the Berlin Wall and how that had an impact on the beauty industry, the fashion industry, and really black identity as a whole?
Well, that's an interesting thing because I use that to sort of show how designers who used to just choose the models, their team chose the models. That's how models could be muses, so that we could hang out and put on clothes and the designers, oh, look at that, that's so fabulous. This intimacy you had with the designer. But once Eastern Europe opened up, those same long, narrow hip, lengthy And that's not even normal, not only in black girls, it's not even normal in white American girls. We eat well. These are people who've starved. You know what I mean? Well, we shouldn't say they starved. They just don't eat like we do. And so that becomes a different generation of people. And these are people who really are not privileged. They really come when they work hard. Americans, no matter how much or little they have, they're still privileged.
Yeah.
When you ask them to come and do something, maybe they don't want to do it like that.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't want to work hard. These girls want to work hard. They had monies to send, just like the Mexicans coming here. They have to send money back to their families. Or people coming here to save themselves and save others. That changed the game. It gave them something else to look at the industry. And all of a sudden, everything that we knew before got replaced. The supermodel and Linda Evangelista, Christy Turlington, all of them got replaced. Naomi Campbell, everybody. Once again, took one designer to do it and make it look like it was a thing to do. The rabbit hole opened up and every other designer started following, and they went on a little too long.
Yeah. Well, what I love about Bethann is that an audience, I can't wait for you to watch that and give me some feedback and when you thought about that. You know, I talk a lot about migration patterns, and I talk about the ways that our world globally is so economically tied and connected. And this idea that once the Berlin Wall fell, the USSR became the Soviet Union, and then it became acceptable and okay then to start doing business and dealings in those countries. And as a result of that, part of that export-import was the models.
Yeah, bringing them out.
That started coming, and brands felt comfortable now, you know, using these models from these countries where at time there were some adverse dynamics that was occurring in that region. And so then it became acceptable for
Well, that's on an intellectual. Remember, we're not intellect, so we're not looking at it like you
are. Of course, yeah, but that's what I was getting out of it. Yeah.
That's the genius of a good mind.
Yeah.
But you're thinking about the fashion designer, they don't even know that. They're just saying, oh, where's the model? And they're just looking up. They're not even thinking about the politics or anything. Economically, they're not. They're just following the yellow brick road.
Yeah. Who was the first fashion brand, would you say, that started that trend of the Eastern European?
We blame Mutual Prada. We blame her because she was the one. Her casting person saw that girl, and they conceived. You know, the girls, you don't even notice them. They all looked alike. The way they chose them, they weren't like we do now. We really look for interesting girls. They chose those girls, and they put all their hair pulled back in a little chignon in the back, and you didn't notice the girl. That was the thing. That's what I thought was interesting about it. You don't notice the girl, you just notice the clothes, because the girls all look alike, and they're not interesting-looking girls.
Yeah. They
have body alignment, they're tall, but they pretty much look the same.
That's so fascinating. And I feel like every designer then just followed suit.
And that happens. Designers are all individual until a trend happens. And then all of a sudden you notice they all are doing the same thing. And it was like the thing to do. And all of a sudden they started doing it. So there are a lot of people who couldn't have worked. We couldn't just say they just got rid of the black girls. Yeah, they got rid of the black girls, but they also got rid of other girls who were maybe glamorous. They took away glamour. Linda Evangelista was a very glamorous model. Even though she was a very, chameleon, she was very interesting. The way she had something, you know. She wouldn't have gotten booked. She didn't. You know what I'm saying? They just changed the game. Yeah, it was interesting. And thank you for saying this is not a fashion film, because it's not.
It's not at all.
It's not. People think so, and I keep saying it's fashion related, but there's a lot of levels. Right.
But if you can tell, this is what I'm unpacking. So for me, I'm unpacking everything but the fashion,
yes,
right? And I'm unpacking everything but beauty, right? Like I'm unpacking all these things. Again, because I always look at pop culture, fashion, and I say in my thesis is that music, film, and fashion and technology are the drivers of social dynamics, right? And you can pull out so many different social constructs from these areas and spaces. And I think this really, for me, you are a representation of that. And I knew your story, Bethann, but I wasn't as familiar. And then once I watched the documentary, I said, oh my God, she's an icon, right? For what you have done. Because not everyone recognizes their problem and raises their hand to do something about it. In a face of an extreme pressure in a dominant world such as media and fashion, right? Where it controls so many different levers. And audience, I'm just talking about that moment when the wall came down. You started seeing tall Eastern European models replace glamour, as Bethann said, and black models. Then it became a crisis of great proportions, right? Because not only are these black women not working, but it's also, too, what does identity look like? And then what does beauty look like? And you raise your hand to say yes. I'm just curious, like, what gave you that will?
All because I was meant to do it. But also for the fact that, everyone's not meant to be, what you say, an activist or leader. But in this particular case, I know I was meant to do that. But also I had been there before. This was not brand new. I mean, we were already on the runways and stuff. Runway models were like queens. That's what they did. They really, and they coined all of that. So whether you be black or white, the black fashion model was there, and she got replaced. Yeah. So for me, I knew my industry in my heart that they really were really running out of gas doing something like this.
And to level set audience, just to let you know, I mean, you guys may remember, there was a time where there was great, public service announcements, op-eds were written, all the things were happening about, what is happening in the fashion industry where you just don't see any black representation, period, right? It became a major story, if you remember that. And then you began to see the shift, and then eventually you began to see the change. Bethann is the reason why it shifted and the reason why it changed. So just to level set, Bethann orchestrated with other people, but she was the lead, and concocted strategies and collected data. Literally, they went through every fashion show around the world. And audience, I love me some data. I don't believe in speaking anything emotional unless there is a factual data point that can back up what I'm saying. Bethann and her colleagues did exactly that, took credible amounts of notes, added the ones and figured out that there were none. There was some, but very limited small amount. And with the data, Bethann then created this strategy that literally changed the face of the fashion industry in that moment. And so I just want to give you your flowers and salute you for that incredible work.
Well, thank you for that.
It's not easy.
No, it's not easy, especially when you, when you think you've settled that. And then all of a sudden, it falls right back, and you have to come back again and do it again. It takes a lot of breathing. It took me sometimes, like this one time when Naomi was calling me, and I had left the model industry and closed up my agency in 1996. And then I went on down to Mexico, and I was good. And she's like, you got to come back. You got to come back. The black model is gone, and she's not there. I'm like dying. Oh, God. Yeah. And you got to find that strength, that energy, because I really... For her to even call me, and I'm the only one she's going to call. I'm the only one that anyone can call, because I've been around the block, and also I believe more positively that they're just in error. They're ignorant right now because this is going on too long. A trend for a moment is one thing, but when it goes on 10 years, we got a problem.
And I'm so glad, Bethann, you brought that up, because that wasn't the first time you did it. You had done that previously, saving the modeling industry, and trying your best to do it. You thought that you were able to solve it in order for people to work and have economics into it, and then all of a sudden it came back again. And so for me, it's just the willpower, because there's so many people who are listening to this right now, who see a change that needs to happen in the community, or they're tired. Right.
That's the thing.
How do you speak to those who are just, I'm tired?
Yeah, that's why you have to, just vote. All I can say to anyone when they say, well, I want to be, no, everyone's not meant to be a leader. That's not your calling. You can do it in small ways, but the one big way you can do it that doesn't take a lot of energy is just voting, because voting politically changes everything. It'll help us be able to do exactly what I've done. Yeah. And you support exactly what I've done and what I'm doing. I'm not always an activist. When you talked about activism before, I'm an advocate, because activism, you need to remain active. I say that's one of my great quotes, but it's true. Activism is something that there are some people who are out there doing it all day long, 24/7, all the time. That's not me. I try to fix it. I put a bolt on it. I walk away. I lean back. I'm an activist. I'm an activist, but now I've gone lean back, and now I'm an advocate. So the idea that activism is something that you can just do in thinking, it's a concept, but you have to be actively doing something. It's a verb, Yeah. So I think it's very important for us all to know that the one thing, and I think politics really is gauging into everything right now. And I think if you understand that politics is really what affects everything that we do, then you'll get out and vote. If you're tired, just find out what day, please, because that's really the importance. That to me, everything is really in our country right now is politics.
Bethann, I'm just curious, as we begin to close, why is it so important? I just want to hear it from you. Why is it so important to have Black representation in fashion?
It was important for me just to make sure I could use that tool so I could affect other industries. I wanted to affect the world. I wanted to affect our society. I wanted to do it because I think that we all just get along a little better if we know each other. I just feel like that. I'm glad this film is being shown a lot to teenage audiences. I was very happy in Sundance when they did that. That audience was amazing. It was my favorite for the Q&As because these kids really understood this film. And to me, it's so important. I told them, they said, what would you want us to do when you leave here that you want to leave with us? And I want them to talk to the one kid in the class that they would never talk to.
Wow.
Just go over, talk to that kid that looks different than you, and just find out who he is. And go to his house and eat some of their parents' food. And get to know who people are, each other. We will be so much better if we know each other. So I use the fashion industry because I could use the fashion model. I could use the actual photography and then being put on runways and being put in magazines. Once you start to see darkness, then you start to get used to it. And then all of a sudden it becomes a thing that's normal now. Now you see the darkest model in winter clothes. Before they wouldn't even do that. They would save that for someone who had to be really they always think that the brownest person was more exotic and that brownest person should be in what we consider resort wear.
Yeah.
But they only put the Nordic girl into the winter clothes.
Wow.
And all that's changed. All that's gone now. So I think it's very important that we all as people just interact with others.
But then I just want to just thank you for your activism and advocacy, and for constantly showing up and being so brave and raising your hand and say yes and to say I can, because so often so many of us do not do that. And you are a representation of one person can make a difference and one person can make a change an entire industry. That isn't easy to be swayed. And so thank you for all that you've done for culture and for movement and economics.
Well, I want to thank you for seeing the film, understanding the film, and letting others know that it's more than what you think it is, because it really is important to see. It tells you a lot. Motherhood.
Yeah.
Just that alone.
It does.
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bethann Hardison, Invisible Beauty, out everywhere. Till next time, folks. Peace.